Thank you for joining us. This is Paul Wilson.
And Chris Emke.
And you're listening to the Diesel Performance Podcast. Chris, just as we promised, we're stepping it up to 2 a week. So we had some really good episodes coming out here recently, and we got a whole bunch more stuff scheduled for the future. But tell me, man, how's your week been going?
Hectic. It's been still just trying to get used to this whole like living in a house and then working in the same house. So just between that and, I've had a lot of podcast listeners over the last few weeks call in, other customers and shops and things like that. So, just trying to get a basic understanding of, what they're experiencing, and it's, we're not the only ones in this. This is a nationwide thing. And, I'm lucky to still be doing what I enjoy to do, just with a different atmosphere. So
you said it there, man.
Yeah.
Speaking of enjoying things, one of the things I know you've been enjoying is driving around that Cummins with the new EasyLink tuning on there. I know our buddy Tim Mahoney has had the truck here recently, but you've driven it with EasyLink on there. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I tell any of the customers that call in, whether you were to work off any of our platforms, MM3, EFI, or EasyLink, you're getting the same quality calibration. So what calibrated power actually does, just the convenience and ease of hardware and how you want to load those files on. And there's no secret, EasyLink is definitely gaining a lot of popularity for good reasons. Having everything work off of your cell phone. For the flashing protocol, it's easier to communicate with the tuner that does the tuning on your truck. Diagnostics and things of that such make life a lot easier because you don't no longer have to use a computer. Everything is done through the smartphone. So I've had EasyLink on the truck for about a year now. So I know that we've kind of kept that secret as far as what goes on over at Calibrated, but it's exciting to see that platform kind of unfold and go live and, get some feedback from some of the guys that were early adopters. And, caveat with that, then we have some testing on that truck for turbochargers. So, we have the 5.9 turbos, which have been super popular for us over at Calibrated. And we figured now would be a good time to incorporate a 6.7 base turbo as a stealth drop-in. So not only has the truck been a test bed for the EasyLink flashing, but now it's also a test bed for a new single turbocharger upgrade for any of the guys out there that might be interested in that. So it's been really cool.
I am so excited for this turbo. This has been definitely our most requested platform is that 4th gen Cummins, those 6.7s. That's really guys from the factory had some issues, right? So everybody's looking for an upgraded replacement turbo, something that's going to be more reliable, still spool up really quick. And, hey, as long as you're upgrading the turbo, you might as well get a little more top end power with it. And that's really exactly what that stealth line is all about. So I know this is going to be a very popular product. We are in the final stages of testing. As soon as there's a release date, we'll make an announcement over on the Facebook page at Duramaxtuner.com. And of course, Chris and I will be talking about it here on the show. Speaking of the show, last week I had a great episode. Now, Chris, you weren't able to join us for the interview portion of that. Guys, I know it might have been a little clunky of a transition from Chris and I talking to all of a sudden me and myself and Ben Evers from Farm Focus were talking. We're working on that. It's a new environment for all of us, so we're kind of figuring out the best way to put the show together. But what I thought was really cool is if you stuck with us through that clunky transition, you got to hear from a guy who's boots on the ground at a farm, working with farmers, doing tractor tuning damn near every day.
Yeah, I mean, Ben is definitely very, very forward in progression with ag tuning, and he has a lot of really quality connections and things that he's done in his business over there in Nebraska over the years. And, there's a lot of unique things that he talks about as far as, the tractor tuning, what's safe, what's not safe, what kind of power up rates could be potentially going on, and how he builds that rapport with the guys he works with.
Absolutely. Also, I know we dove into really talking about, hey, not every farmer out there is going to need tractor tuning. Who are the guys who this is going to benefit the most? What group of farmer, what type of farmer is really going to see this investment pay off? So if you guys are interested in that, make sure you go back to last week's episode with Ben Evers from Farm Focus. Listen to that show. We had a lot of great stuff in there. And Chris, another place that our fans can go is Fans of Diesel Performance Podcast. Facebook group.
Yeah, and it seems like Paul, you've been stirring up some good topics where guys are starting to engage, simply because people like to talk about their trucks, and the podcast was kind of built off of that in our early stages. We used to do a lot of listener rides and a lot of just like random builds that would come our way, and we thought, why not go back to our roots as we're trying to ramp up 2 episodes a week, start getting listeners in on this and talk about their builds and talk about things that they have done in their experience in diesel performance, and kind of give an opportunity for you and I to stop talking about our experience in diesel performance. So it's a really cool opportunity. I think I get calls probably on a daily basis, I would say, or if not every day, it's every other day, where a guy's like, "Hey, I listened to you on the podcast. Here's what I got going on." Well, those should be spun off into episodes. I feel there's a lot of good quality content there for potential episodes, or just the truck build itself. Maybe some stuff that we don't actually specialize in or see every day.
That's right, man. This is a diesel performance show for diesel performance guys by diesel performance guys. We started, absolutely right, Chris. We started this being in the Facebook groups, being on the forums, begging people to come on the show, trying to explain to them what a podcast actually was and things of that nature. Right. I don't know how many people I had to explain what a podcast is. And it's awesome to be able to go back now and put up a post in our group and have such an overwhelming response. I really just want to say from the bottom of my heart, thank you. You guys really stepped up in a huge way. It's great to hear that we have that type of passion and that many people out there who listen to the show and who want to contribute, who want to be a part of it. I would say along with all of that, as previously noted, I am trying to figure this technology out, guys. I'm not a super tech savvy guy. I kind of wing it as much as the rest of us. So we're going to have a few challenges. I know we had a really excited listener guest this morning who I had to reschedule, but no big deal. I got a couple of backups in place. We already got some new equipment in place. We are 100% going to make this happen. So if you've already signed up, don't worry. I'll be following up with you with instructions of how we're going to put the show together. And I think this is going to be big. I think people are going to really like this. Speaking of things that I know, go ahead, really Chris, cool. Please.
What I was going to say is what's also cool is not only do you and I support these ideas and come up with these crazy things, but so do our sponsors. Our sponsors back us and support us in these decisions. So, shout out to Exergy Performance, I'd say, for starters, right, Paul?
100%. Absolutely. Yeah. Exergy Performance and WC Fab. Without them, this show would be really, really tough to do, guys, if not impossible. So huge shout out to them. They're going to be stepping up and helping us produce some content here in the near future. So look forward to hearing from some of the guys over at Exergy and some of the guys from WC Fab. I did just notice, speaking of Exergy, I saw some really cool footage, and I know it's already old. This post is from Levon Miller's page back in the middle of March. But man, they had some shots of their pro mod with the win at the ODSS opener, 436 at 173, 428 at 169 miles an hour in the semifinals. And then hey man, my heart always breaks whenever I see a crash in the finals, but I get it. They got the win there, but yeah, really, really cool stuff. You guys, if you listen to this show, you probably know who Levon Miller is. You certainly know who Firepunk Diesel is. And you know that they run Exergy Performance fuel systems, period. Hands down, no questions asked.
So went over at that camp for sure. And then the other sponsor, of course, WC Fab. Paul, did you see that they just released a coolant tank for like the L5P Duramax? Did you see that?
It looks so cool.
It's a really, really nice, an additional upgrade to really pretty up the engine bay. It's a coolant tank that has the low coolant level sensor. It has a billet anodized cap, overflow hose, coolant levels, slight sight glass, so you can actually see the coolant itself. Powder coated to your, color of choice. So if you do like one of their L5P bundle kits with the coolant hose and things like that, you'll be able to have the coolant tank to match. And it essentially fits right into the OEM, placement. So, if you're looking to, once again, modify some more stuff on the L5P and, get some more bling, if you will, under the hood, that's a really, really, really cool product that you could add. and it's fairly affordable. I mean, you got to think about that. You know, what do you get for putting up the engine bay and making things more functional and not have to break the bank in the mix?
100% correct. I really love totally non-functional parts when we upgrade them on our trucks. I really, really do. Because you're not going to make more power. Your truck's not going to run at a lower coolant level because you ran, this awesome looking coolant tank. It's literally just going to be when you pop the hood, you look at it and like, I made the right choice. It looks fucking good. And that's it. That's what it's for.
It's complementary. Yeah, it complements everything else. When you have a factory coolant hose and you have, maybe, the air intake and the intercooler pipe, adding in those added components like the coolant hose or the coolant tank, it sets a tone when you pop the hood.
Totally
Simple
agree.
as that. Not having half the factory components there and then half this cool bling, nice, vibrant, powder-coated, fresh stuff under the hood. So it's
I love
nice.
it. Well, Chris, it's time for our favorite part of the show. We have a really special segment set up for today, something that we haven't really done this before. We were kind of talking about different podcast topics and ideas and what can we do for a show. And it kind of came up. Well, what about guys who are going out and looking at 2019 trucks? Yes, we know there's some caveats here that some of the generations and some of the options changed come 2020, but right now there's a lot of 2019 trucks still on the lot, or 2019 freshly used low mile trucks still on the lot. They're probably a really big seller, especially in today's economy. So we thought, hey man, shit, you've driven the 2019 Cummins dually at work, I don't know, 1 million times.
It's sitting in my driveway right now.
Nick Priegnitz has more miles on an L5P than anyone else I know. And Tim Mahoney from our R&D and tuning department, he drives a 2019 PStroke on the daily. Why don't we get the three of you on the show together and let's talk about, here's what some of the benefits are. Here's where some of the weak points are. This is what these 2019 trucks look like. And we'll leave it up to the listeners to decide what they want to go get for themselves. All right, guys, it's time for our favorite part of the show. This is where Calibrated Power sponsors our special guest. And this week it's Calibrated Power, our special guest, Nick Priegnitz and Tim Mahoney. Nick, how the hell are you?
I'm special, man. I'm glad to be here.
Nick, you're a regular on the show. And Tim, how the hell are you?
I'm good, man. Just plugging along and enjoying the nice scenic view here.
Chris, we've had both of these guys on the show. Clearly, Nick has been on a few more times than Tim. Usually we have our guests tell us about their background in diesel performance. Chris, what do you think today? Could you tell our listeners about Nick's background in diesel performance?
I don't know, man. I don't think he has the credibility to be on here personally, Paul.
Can I mute him remotely?
Yeah. I mean, you think of Calibrated Power, Duramaxtuner. I would say he's one of the last kind of founders in the diesel tuning. When you think of the old forum days and EFI Live days where diesel tuning was coming up, I mean, Nick was grinding it out in the forums amongst a lot of other, great names in the industry. And, he's still around and still plugging away. So I'd say that gives him all the credibility he needs.
There you go. I'll do the rundown for Tim. Tim's been around racing, automotive performance, and going fast for a long time. Tim might be a little bit newer to the team over here at Calibrated Power, just the last couple years, but he's been making a huge impact on our tuning and R&D side. So we're really glad to have Tim on, really glad to have Nick here. You two, Tim and Nick, have been working together on a ton of R&D stuff here lately. Most recently, I think you guys have been driving around and beating up on Chris Emke's truck, which I love to talk about. So Tim, give us a little rundown, man. What have you been working on with Emke's Cummins?
Yeah, so Chris's truck, we pulled the twins off of it. Those been on for, I don't know, man, 3 or 4 years now. Really great setup with that. And we wanted to kind of improve our drop-in stealth line and get a VE turbo out there. So we have our HE351 VE on that truck right now and just kind of getting our feet wet with it, getting it loose on the dyno and seeing what it's about, and hopefully be able to deliver a product to the consumers here in the next couple of months, and get some miles on the truck and try not to do too many burnouts or hit too many curves with Chris's 22x12. But
Oh, I'm smiling so much right now. That makes me so happy. Um, Nick, one of the other projects in the shop I know you've been directly involved with is the Roxor, the intercooler, the turbo, the water meth. Give our listeners just a quick rundown. What does that project look like these days?
Yeah, we've really been working on trying to get extra power to the Roxor in an economical fashion. The Roxor is a 2.5 liter common rail diesel. It looks just like a Jeep, and it's got quite the popularity, quite the following lately. So we've established ourselves as a performance leader in the Roxor lineup with tuning, the RX-41 turbocharger, the intercooler kit, and we've been tinkering around with some water meth injection on the truck to try and get the thing back to 200 horsepower economically. So, that's been one of the things we've been working on. We've also been working on the EcoBoost, 3.5 liter, quite a bit lately, trying to get the E85 ironed out in a nice value-driven economical fashion for our customers on the EcoBoost side. Had a lot of success with that. One of the things I count on Tim for is beating the snot out of stuff. So, if drivability is my slant, Tim's slant is performance. So if it doesn't perform, we're going to know about it with Tim driving it. And he's certainly been putting the EcoBoost and the Roxor through the ringer lately on the dyno and on the street.
Hell yeah, that's the stuff we like to hear. Well, guys, listen, we are doing a special episode today. We're doing a 2019 truck podcast review. Chris, I know this is one that you're super excited about because you've been driving that 2019 Cummins ever since they started putting your truck under the scalpel.
Yeah, I think what I'm most excited about is it's amazing how many guys call into the shop over at Calibrated Power on a daily basis. And they're, everyone's in the market for a new truck, and, we have access to all these trucks. So what do we think? It'll be nice to kind of give them a reference to this episode and, moving forward to say, hey, I could tell you all the ins and outs, but maybe you need to listen to this episode as a reference point to kind of, weigh in your choice there. So I'm excited for that alone.
Sure. Absolutely. Now, Tim, you drive a 2019 PowerStroke, so we thought you'd be the perfect guy to come on and talk a little bit about that 2019 PowerStroke experience. And Nick, technically you drive the 2020 Denali, if I remember correctly, but I think you have enough experience between the 2017 L5P to the 2020 L5P that you can speak at least somewhat intelligently about the 2019 option out there.
Yeah, the 2017 L5P is pretty much the same as the 2019. The 2020, I'm sure there's a lot of fans listening who are interested in what the 2020 offers as well, and I'll jump on that a little bit. But I also have a lot of seat time with the Ford and the Dodge as well. I think I can give your listeners a well-rounded glimpse of what it's like to drive the newer offerings.
Yeah, I think all of you guys have gotten to drive all three trucks. Tim, my blind guess here is that you probably have the most experience behind the seat of driving these three trucks, considering kind of what your position is. Why don't you jump in, man? Tell us about what that 2019 PowerStroke is like when you roll it off the factory showroom floor.
Yeah, so and I'll start, I guess, before I bought the PowerStroke, right? I was coming from an LML, had a couple of LMLs that have been tuned over the years and stuff. And, it's no secret that the GM in, 2011 and stuff, the interior is kind of up to par. And then as we went on, no changes and stuff were made. And, you get into the CP4 and those type of failures and wanting to make power and stuff. And I started leaning in and looking into the Fords, and to me, it was the best bang for the buck all around performer as far as, not only making the most power, but getting in it, being comfortable, heated AC seats, all that fun stuff. So that's where I really came about looking at the Ford and got the right deal on the truck. And I do think I tuned it with about 250 miles on it though, but the truck did drive awesome stock. Got some baselines and stuff like that. I want to say that the truck dynoed right around 390 to the rear tire. So, yeah, that was pretty much it stock. And I don't know if you want to kick it around the horn. You want me to keep going with what we've done to it?
Yeah, give me a little bit about the exterior and the interior feel. So if somebody who maybe is just looking at a new truck and they don't know anything about performance, the first thing they go to look at on the lot is, what is this thing like? Do you like the way the exterior of that 2019 PowerStroke looks?
Yeah, definitely. I think the 17 plus PowerStrokes, they're all really sharp. You start getting into, the big LED headlights and stuff. And that's probably what drew me to them initially. You can fit a nice big tire in there stock. So I just have it's a 20x9 wheel on it, but it's got 35s on it now with stock height, doesn't rub or anything. So like getting a little bit extra tire under there. The truck just looks mean. It's got a meaner look to it, but that comes with a little bit of a stiffer ride. It's not like the old Fords and stuff, but it definitely doesn't ride like a Duramax. That's where I'd say the one drawback of the Ford is. Inside's awesome. It's got a decent sized screen in there as long as you stay out of a Ram. And everything else as far as it's got, Bluetooth, all the standard bells and whistles that you'd want in any truck nowadays, So it has all that. Performance wise, it's a quick truck. It'll pull a trailer, it'll pull a gooseneck. We pulled 2 trucks to a couple sled pulls last year and to the drag strip and stuff. And, all around there, it's a really enjoyable truck to get in and drive. It's comfortable, take the family out, nice and quiet, quiet on idle, not really shaky or anything like that. Most guys wouldn't even know you're driving a diesel if they were next to you at the light nowadays. So.
Sure. Yeah. God, that's such a true story that they're not, and we talk about this on the show pretty often, that they're not your dad's or your grandpa's old smoky pig, right? These are refined, expensive pieces of machinery. So we know guys really want to know the ins and outs and the details of what are some of the highlights and lowlights of these trucks. Chris, kick us off with that 2019 Cummins, man. What did you love about it from the factory? What was it like when it was bone stock?
Yeah, I mean, I think, the appeal there is 2019, they did a rehash on the interior. They have a monstrous 12-inch screen, really good, features for, parking assist and backup cameras and things like that. The gauge cluster, steering wheel, things like that, the controls, a lot of the overall functionality interior-wise has been refined from the 4th gens, which, when you look at the 2013 to 2018 trucks, I think they're pretty top tier as far as interior is concerned. So I'd say, interior wise, that's a huge selling point. Exterior wise, they really didn't do a whole lot. A lot of the same styling takes place. They redid some of the bumper styling. The headlights are definitely better if you get one of the higher optioned out trucks. I personally like, kind of like the newer styling of the front end of the truck. But I'd say overall, other than the front end facelift, the trucks kind of look similar. When you get into like drivability of the truck, I would say if it's a 2500 versus a 2500, a lot of the same drivability is going to be there. Clunkiness in the Ram, there's no secret. That's always kind of been a thing. The truck that I've been driving has been one of the 3500 HO trucks. So it has a little bit more power from the factory. Power delivery is fairly decent. The Ace and Trans, they have some quirks in the defueling and some of the shifting of gears. So I'm not the biggest fan of that. But, overall, the truck itself, it's a really solid truck. It tows really well. There's no secret that it probably has a little less power than some of the competition in 2019. But I think as far as a Ram goes and a Cummins engine goes, it's the most refined, but still probably feels more so as a truck when you compare it to the other 2 manufacturers. So,
I love what you said about the exterior. I feel like if you took the first generation Ram and the newest generation Ram and set them next to each other, like even a 3-year-old could say like, oh yeah, there's probably just one truck missing between these two. Like there's only one missing link. Whereas if you took the first Duramax and the newest Duramax, they look like almost totally different trucks altogether.
Right.
Nick, speaking of the Duramaxes, run us through it, man. What's this L5P all about when guys are just getting them stock?
The L5P is a solid performer, no doubt. The Duramax has always had a reputation as a strong running truck. It's got the Allison behind it, of course. In 19, that's the same. You got a 6-speed Allison behind it. In 2020, you get the 10-speed. I might jump into that in a minute. But, there's always a horsepower war between Ford and GM. And usually GM releases their stats and then Ford comes out and trumps their stats by 15 or 20 horsepower, whatever it is. And, GM never really gets recognized as the horsepower king stock. But I'll tell you, driving an L5P stock 2500 versus a Ford 2500 stock, you're looking at about a 500-pound difference between the trucks. And the power delivery of the L5P, it almost reminds me of a gently tuned, like a toe-tuned LML. Very crisp on the throttle. The new turbocharger with that engine is snappier, so there's more response. And that's something that owners of diesel trucks have often complained about over the years, is that the reaction isn't there when you compare a big block gas motor to a diesel. So the L5P, sure, I would say, is very snappy. The new L5P, if you're used to LMLs or you're used to LB7s or LBZs or whatever, the towing, as far as the ability to lug that engine, is much stronger than it was on previous generations. So the L5P engine is much happier lugging from even 1100 RPM, which is something that usually the Dodge, usually the Ram, the Cummins platform is known for. GM took a snipe at the Ram on this one and designed that new turbocharger setup to be responsive down low. Now, they also lowered the peak shift point about 200 or 300 RPM, but I would rather have that torque down low in a smooth platform that can lug. I think they did a nice thing, by changing that turbocharger. When I say smooth, that the power delivery on the L5P, in my opinion, is smoother, so less noise, vibration, and harshness than either of the other two. Not by much on the Ford, and I'm sure someone has the data somewhere that says, this Ford is quieter than this L5P, and that might be true. But it's definitely smoother than the Ram, and the ride quality of the truck, the GM offering is with the independent front suspension. There's no comparison between the 2500 Ford and the 2500 GM. 2500 GM. All else is equal. Tire pressure is equal. The GM just rides nicer. It's less work on the driver for long drives. Sometimes, my family and I will drive 7 or 8 hours up north to my wife's parents' place, and if I'm picking a truck to go up north with, it's a GM. It's just less work for me as a driver. Less taxing to get beat up by the thing. Certainly, nobody wants to drive a 3500 unloaded on that trip. But the 2500s, if you buy that truck, it's what you're driving when you go on those long trips. So if you do that a lot and you're unloaded, you probably want to consider that. I know the independent front suspension does not get a great name as far as looks and as far as, rugged truck look. But looks aside, the performance of the independent front suspension in the GM is very strong. It's tough to beat.
Well, I got two things to reply back to you there real quick, Nick. One, the independent front suspension definitely, I think, poked at from some of the other fanboys, right? Some of the Ford fanboys and fanboys poke around about its level of reliability. So can you speak to a little bit about that independent front suspension and what does it look like long term these straight axle trucks?
Yeah, I mean, if you're sled pulling, you're going to see memes about GM trucks with their tires pointed in and the tie rod's broken, right? It's just what GMs do. And that certainly is the case if they're not set up right, and certainly is the case on the older trucks if they don't have tie rod sleeves. I will say these newer trucks seem to be a little stronger in the tie rod area. We sled pulled with the 17 and didn't have to upgrade the tie rods at all. Now, of course, we lowered the torsion bars and got the truck a little more level there for that, for that practice. But as far as parts longevity, I mean, you're going to be putting ball joints in and bushings and all the pieces and parts that go along with a front straight axle. I mean, if there's one brand out there that should never talk about front suspension, it's Ram owners. I mean, get your checkbook out every 30,000 miles. And not to throw stones, but it's just the damn truth. And the GM, I would say, you can get a lot more longevity out of it.
Didn't you sell your last Cummins to Chris right around 30,000 miles?
Yeah, that was the trick. That was part of the deal. In this front end not rebuilt discount.
Emke, you want to take any swings at the L5P Duramax front end?
No, it's a great truck.
The exterior looks?
I'm not going to throw stones.
Look at this, Chris on the high road.
I think Chevy is the one that's got the most explaining to do for their front end. But, style is I don't know that it's worth talking about style on this thing. You know what I mean? It is what it is. If you like it, you like it. If you don't, you don't. I certainly like the way the 2020 GMC Denali looks, and I like the way all the GMCs look. That's just my preference.
All right.
I do want to say that factory options a little lacking on the GM side. It used to be that the Denali put the other makes to shame, and now I would say that a Platinum and a Limited do have a stronger options package. The displays are nicer. Just the general intuitive feel of the control panels. I think Ram is probably best. Ford isn't far behind, and GM is stuck in 2015.
Oh my God, that feels like blasphemy, but I can't say I disagree. Tim, what are your thoughts on this?
I've spent a good amount of time in all of them, I would say. Favorite interior, definitely, I go with the Dodge and what Nick's saying there as far as GM lacking. The 2020 does get a lot better. I would say it's not complete. I think if you're looking for interior and comfort, you got a strong choice between, do you want cool options or you want a truck that rides really nice? Like Nick was saying, the Duramax does. It does ride really nice. It has that going for it. And you kind of lean back over to the Ford and you got a really good riding truck in my eyes and my thought, but you get away from some of the other stuff. The GM, in my opinion, kind of rides like a Tahoe or whatnot, a smaller truck. You get in a Ford and it drives like a truck. Same thing with the Ram. And Ford's got some other options that neither of them have the panoramic roof. It doesn't seem like Ram's done that or GM has done that yet either.
That is a really nice option. That sells me quick. How many cup holders and where's my panoramic roof? I'm just joking. Those are both quotes from my wife. Okay. Upgradability. Chris, if you're one of our listeners is listening to this show, they probably care more about what can they do to the truck after they buy it than maybe necessarily what did the truck come like from the factory. Walk me through that 2019 Cummins, man. What are their options out there?
Well, I mean, first and foremost, it's going to depend on what application they have. Do they have the standard output with the 68? Do they have the high output with the ASIN? Because that's going to more or less position you to two different power outputs when tuned, just as we're at baseline from the factory. And a lot of that is held back by the transmission and what the trans can support to the ground power-wise. There's no secret here. When we talk about the three platforms, Ram seem like in the 2500 arena, Ram's going to be the bottom of the barrel power output wise. And even tuned, the benefits that you're going to gain are not going to be as great as, the other two being compared to. There's other steps and things that need to come into the mix in order to, bump up that power to make it competitive with, the Chevy or the Ford. But you get one of these trucks, tune only. If you get into one of the high output trucks, you could crack the 500 horsepower with just tunes. If you have a 68 RFE, the 2500 style truck, you can go up 110 horsepower, get you into that, upper 400 range. And then with a couple small modifications in the trans, you could etch your way into that 500 horse range as well. The thing that's crazy here is when you talk about the power and something that Nick touched on earlier, like the L5P engine took a couple notes from Cummins and how the Cummins is known for low end torque. There's always this correlation with an inline six diesel and being torquey. Okay. When you get into the V8s, you always have this like higher performance engine feel where it makes power in the mid range and then the top end. The Cummins loves, especially the 6.7 and the new style, motor that's out. It loves low RPM. 1100 RPM. It loves to sit at 1100 RPM and just lug. And it has the power, more importantly, the torque to pull through it in a very violent way. I mean, that truck can pull a house down, to say the least. Now, to get to some of the power levels that these other trucks are at, you'd have to throw turbochargers into the mix and things like that. But anyone that I've talked to so far, myself included with, the 19 dually, at tune only, man, they are definitely impressive to say the least.
Okay, excellent. So definitely got some options out there about what you can do and how far you can take it. What do you think are some of the limitations of that truck as far as upgrades, Chris? Where would you suggest somebody maybe hits the pause button and rethinks going any further?
dealing with, the people that I've dealt with over the years and, understanding people's needs and wants, 600 horsepower is really that sweet spot of towing capability, reliability, and fun having on the weekends. And the 6.7 can definitely get you there. A newer Ram can get you there with, a few upgrades. Sky's the limit on any of these trucks if you have the money and the resources and the time to invest. But I would say, on the 6.7, you throw a small turbocharger upgrade on there. You have tuning to support that. And, you do some minor transmission upgrades if it's a 68, you could have a reliable, daily driven turnkey truck any day of the week.
That's a nice option to look at. Nick, I know we can do pretty similar power numbers out of the Duramax. Why don't you walk us through it, man? What are our L5P customers going to be looking at doing once they're ready to go to the next level on their trucks?
Yeah, I think it's important to establish a baseline first. In the L5P, typically dyno's about 405 on our dyno. For the Fords, 395, 400-ish, and the Rams, 340 on the SO and 360 on the HO. So it's a strong performer on our dyno to start. Tuned, these trucks are expensive to tune. You're looking at currently about $4,000, $4,500, depending on give or take. Hopefully that comes down in the near future. But either way, in the short term, it's unlikely it's going to come down below $2,500 to tune the truck. However, if you do tune the truck, 550 horsepower is definitely on the table. At that level, you have 550 rear wheel, 1,200 rear wheel foot pound. If you want to go to 1,400 rear wheel on the torque, you're gonna put a hurting on the Allison. And that's really the limitation on the GM at that point. So, next upgrade would be the transmission. Once the trans is solid, then you're out of air. So we're working on currently a Stealth for the L5P. Once that's out, I think the fuel system is good for, the Denso fuel system on that truck is very strong. We've seen that on some of the competition builds that fuel system can go near 700 horsepower. So
holy moly.
Yeah, and I'm not advocating that 700 horsepower is compared to Chris's 600 horsepower.
Right.
Certainly 600 horsepower is a lot of fun in a street truck. It's all about reliability and how you're using the truck. But I think somewhere in the mid sixes, with a Stealth turbo, a tune, and some a mild trans build would be easily, within the scope of daily operation.
Man, that's cooking, especially in one of the lighter trucks out of the three, right? If we were comparing them, that's going to be a recipe for some fun on the road. Tim,
you mentioned that. You mentioned that light truck real quick. Just the trans shift quality on the Allison on the 6-speed when it's tuned is really good. It's not quite to the level of the 6R140, which is the best, and Tim will tell us all about it.
Okay. I got to agree with you. To be honest with you, as also a huge Duramax fan, I've said it on the show before, man. These new 6.7s, they're just hard to beat. Tim, tell our listeners why.
Yeah, so the new 6.7 Ford, and kind of what I was excited to get into it after driving we had the 17 F450 for a little while there, was just the power and what they brought to the table stock. So tune only, you're about $1,400 to $1,600, depending upon if you want, let's say switchable tunes and trans tuning and all that. We're about $1,500. And you get yourself about 210, 220 rear wheel horsepower with that. So you start in just under 400, around 390 to the rear wheels. And you finish up with the biggest tune. My truck's even got a stock air box, and we did 606 to the rear tire with that guy, and somewhere around 1230, 1240 foot-pounds of torque. Transmission tuning with some line pressure and some other logic there, and the truck's a really strong runner. It's got the air, it's got the fuel, it's got the drive line to put to the ground. There's not much I would want to do to the truck. I've messed around with trying to put some methanol injection and stuff on there just to get it a little bit further. But as far as your average person, that 600 horsepower mark like Chris was talking about is really the go-to, I think, as far as, having some fun on the street and being able to tow your camper or working the truck across the country. A lot of guys really don't need more than that. And, like I said, for $1,400 or so, you can have something that puts both the other trucks, to shame, at least, without 10 or 15 grand thrown at them.
Wow. Almost feels like an attack on Cummins and Duramax there. No, I'm just kidding, Tim. Like I said, man, I agree. It is just hard to beat to get that type of efficiency out of your investment. The cost of the trucks also varies, though. If somebody was going out and shopping for a 2019, there's some differences, right, in what the actual retail price is going to be on a used one, or even on a leftover new one if there's any left. Chris, everybody else commented on how nice the Ram interior was, but you commented on how low the horsepower was. Do you feel like those two things kind of balance each other out? Do you feel like you're like, I would be okay? Would you personally be okay going to buy a 2019 Cummins, saying, yeah, it has less horsepower, but it has a nicer interior? Is that worth it?
I think if you were to go and compare, if I have a lot of seat time amongst all these trucks. I've taken our old 2017 L5P across country to the East Coast and back, and I did that half with the tune and half without a tune. I would much rather be caught in the 2019 Ram stock hauling a trailer than I would the 17 L5P stock for stock. Now, granted, one being a dually, one being single rear wheel, there are some differences there, but creature comfort's a big thing, and I think that's something as the years progress and the truck manufacturers step up their game with different options, they become a necessity. And I think, again, with Ram, even though the horsepower and torque is horsepower is a little lower, the way the torque comes in and the way the truck comes into its power band, it really disguises some of that under a load. So for me, yeah, I would say that, the interior is going to outweigh the advertised power number, because I think once you hook the truck to a trailer and really get it out and working, there's really not much of a difference. It's not like it's a 200 horsepower difference and the truck is underpowered. The truck by no means is underpowered. The truck performs very well.
Okay.
Yeah, and just to help you out there, Chris, I think the Ram, the Cummins probably leaves the most out there as far as what we can do with tuning, as far as drivability, in my opinion. If I was going to buy all three trucks and I could only tune one, I would tune the Ram every time. Just the overall drivability, the overall experience, I feel like there's a lot left on the table with the Ram, and it's I'd say the biggest difference between stock and tuned would be the Ram, as far as, like I said, just overall driving experience. That would be the one I would tune first.
Paul, you mentioned all three trucks have different price points. When you compare three equal trucks, Ford top as far as expense is concerned, GM is in the middle, and then Ram is the bottom end on the totem pole, I would say, if you were to look at optioned out trucks.
Yeah.
But then when you start really pricing out and looking into it, I mean, a 2019 Denali is nowhere near the stature of what a Lariat Ford or even a Laramie Ram would be. So guys are buying these trucks. Oh, I have a Denali, and they're really not that impressive inside. So as I would say, if I were to go to dealership and test drive all three trucks, performance, feel right off the bat, no, I probably wouldn't buy the Ram, right? But I am going to be looking at the Ram because of the creature comforts and the options offered and the price tag that goes along with that. I think you get a lot of value for what you pay for.
Okay. You get a lot of comfort. You get a lot of features, a lot of really cool kind of setup. Maybe not the best factory programming from what it sounds like. So you're in some dire needs for some tuning there. But okay, I get it. Nick, you're another one. You've had probably too much seat time in all three of these trucks. What do you think about the Cummins and about the PStroke?
I think the Cummins is a great platform for towing. The creature comforts are great, but they're balanced with the noise and vibration and harshness of the engine. And I'm sure a bunch of your listeners are going to roll their eyes at me right now. And those listeners probably are in the target market of the Ram, right? But they are leaving something on the table with regard to refinement and quietness in the cab. And there's a large portion of truck buying market out there who are looking for that, right? Who are coming from the gas truck or timid about diesel maybe, and that Cummins still might be a little bit too much there.
Yeah, absolutely. Good feedback.
Well, I think to back on that a little bit too, I mean, there's a lot of different buyer personas in the space. When you talk about the vibration and the noise, like Nick's referring to, I think a Duramax or a Ford owner of a newer truck are going to be the ones to kind of note or see that firsthand, as opposed to if you're a prior Cummins owner and you're going from an older 4th gen into the 5th gen or a 3rd gen into a 4th gen, like they keep just getting better and better. They've improved as models continue.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, if you're one of those guys, you're gonna love coming over from, you're gonna love coming from a 2009 or a 13 or whatever into a 19 Ram, no doubt about it. With regard to the Ford, I think the Ford is overall a performance. I used to say the Cummins was the best performance value, and now I think the Ford is the best performance value. The Trans is awesome. The truck makes 606 rear wheel horsepower without much drama. The torque converter clutch, the strategy, the tunability. As a tuner, I love tuning the Ford. It listens and does exactly what I ask it to. And that, that's just a personal preference, but it's nice. It's a nice platform to work with. They look great. I think it's a great balance of a truck. I've recommended several of my friends go drive Fords, and I am traditionally a GM guy. Not that I haven't bought all three of them for the business, and I enjoy driving all three in different scenarios. But I think the Ford has a definite place in the market space, and I think anybody who's coming to a 3/4 ton or a 1 ton truck for this purpose owes it to themselves to drive.
I think that's good advice. Tim, any closing advice for our listeners today?
No, I mean, since, us being us, I think we should maybe talk about the emissions equipment a little bit. And that was another big factor is, we're kind of leaning on the Cummins is that's the bottom of the barrel truck there, if you want to call it, but the lesser of the three, in my opinion, and from tuning them and driving across the country and messing with Chris's truck, and especially our 19, I feel like the Cummins has the best emissions equipment or the best tuning around that emissions equipment. They obviously have a lot of experience with, semi trucks, over the road trucks like that. So I feel like their emissions equipment and the reliability of that is very strong. Not that the other two aren't as good. The Cummins is very good with passive regenning. The Duramax, not so much. It will do it if you're on the highway loaded down, but it's more going to be a true regen style. And same thing with the Ford there. I don't know if Nick has any other input on that. But.
Yeah, I would say I really like the LML emissions system, and I think they switched a few things up on the L5P, and you don't get as much passive regen, and so the regen distances are a little shorter on the L5P, which is it's tough to explain to a customer that the newest generation of truck has a shorter regen distance and doesn't passively regen while you're towing, which is something I've just come to expect as a buyer now. I do think that the Cummins has the strongest emission system as far as long-term durability, and it just, to go 1,000 miles between active regens, it easily gets up into passive regen. I think it's a solid design.
It's huge. That's a big part of the trucks nowadays, and I think it's something that's very easily overlooked as buyers are considering them. I think most often I hear guys just ask, well, how often do I got to put DEF in it? Well, DEF isn't the only part of the emissions equipment, right? Just like the EGR, like no one piece of this makes up all of it. I will say, Tim, I am surprised because I agree with you that I hear about less problems with the Ram emissions equipment, but I do have to say I really like the general architecture of the Duramax emissions equipment. That L5P bringing the SCR right up on the back of the turbo, fuel lines that shoot fuel directly into the DPF. I would have thought that we would have gotten better results. Nick, Tim, any ideas why the Rams emissions equipment seems to just be better functioning?
That's a good question, Paul. I think it's like anything in the OEM. It's a balance of accounting, warranty, what's on the parts shelf currently, and the experience of the engineering team. And it certainly may have been easier for GM to meet emissions or to get more torque out of the engine down low by placing the SOC or the DOC right behind the turbocharger. It's always a trade-off, right? There, you're trading one benefit for another benefit, and it's certainly possible that part of the improved drivability of the L5P pack and the improved torque output, have something to do with that. And without talking to the factory engineering team, I think we're all kind of remiss in speculating. Yeah,
best guessing it. Sure, I dig it. Chris, any final thoughts you'd like to leave our listeners with?
I think we covered everything really well, going over just the outline, and our cheat notes, if you will. I think we covered everything to a good degree. L5P is going to be the most expensive to modify at this point. The Ford and the Cummins, you're going to be kind of in the same ballpark price wise, just the tune, but you're going to get more out of the Ford. I think at the end of the day here, you're going to have your loyalists that are, loyal to a specific brand, and they're Ford guys through and through, GM guys through and through, or Ram guys through and through. And then you get those guys that, cross over from time to time. And, I don't think there's a secret that as these trucks are getting newer and the technology improves, you're getting a better platform, a more structurally sound platform, technology and just everything that comes along with these vehicles. It makes you never want to go back to one of the older ones again, in my opinion. So.
That's awesome. Well, guys, I just want to say thank you so much for joining us, Nick and Tim. We really appreciate you guys being on the show.
Yeah.
Thanks for having us on.
Hey, I want to mention one thing. Last closing thought here, Paul. I have a favorite option for each truck that I wrote down that I just want to share.
Oh, please.
The AutoTrack 4-wheel drive started in 2020 for the L5P. Now we talked about 2019, but I like the AutoTrack 4-wheel drive, and can't get that in the other makes. On the Ford, I like the differential lock, and I wish the other manufacturers would take note from that and allow you to lock the rear differential. That was one of the coolest features that I found on Tim's truck when I borrowed it, is that you can, lock the rear diff. Like, it's 2020. We should be able to do that by now, right? And then on the Ram, not really an option, but tightest turning radius, man. Like, it's the easiest truck to park. And I know I tell you guys every time that I talk about the Ram, but if you are letting your wives drive your trucks, less hassle parking means less curb rash on those 22x12s. And
it's got the most cup holders and the tightest turning radius.
You should tell Tim that.
Oh, man, guys, I think this has been a lot of fun. I think this is a great episode. Listeners, if you have comments, feedback, questions, you just want to talk to us, get a hold of us, man. You can jump on to Fans of Diesel Performance Podcast Facebook group. There's a ton of really cool stuff on there. And there's also a chance for you, the listener, to actually be a part of the show. We're starting to do listener ride reviews. I'm sure you guys just heard Levi on one of our most recent episodes, and we got a whole bunch more of those segments coming at you in the near future. For today, this has been Paul Wilson
and Chris Empty.
Thanks so much for listening.